Dummy baddie in tight athletic wear sweats through an intense late-night workout, completely unaware of the eyes watching her from the second-floor window. Up in his room, her brother-in-law looks down at her, believing he knows the real reason she goes out to skip rope every single night. While she claims she is merely dieting, the gremlin finds this to be a poor excuse, noting that she continues this exhausting routine even after returning from a long run. As he watches her jump, he concludes that she simply cannot stand the loneliness of a long night by herself. Leaning against the window frame, our monkey is filled with a sense of longing as his mind drifts back to the day his military service ended. His older brother Si-jun had come to visit him at the base, bringing along a stunning woman and introducing her as his new sister-in-law. Hearing her friendly greeting and learning that she already knew so much about him made his heart race instantly, leading to the sudden realization that he had just met his absolute ideal woman. Unfortunately for him, his dream woman was already married to his own brother, leaving him to sigh in defeat. Back in the present, he watches her dry her face with a towel and wishes with a heavy sigh that he could be the one by her side. He can only watch in silence as she finishes her workout and walks back toward the house, leaving him wishing his brother was not his family. The next morning brings bright sunshine and the persistent ringing of a cell phone, waking the young man from his deep slumber. He groggily sits up in bed, rubbing his head and realizing he probably stayed up far too late, staring out the window like an idiot. Deciding that a quick shower is exactly what he needs to wake up, he lazily wanders down the stairs and heads straight for the bathroom. He carelessly swings the door open without bothering to knock, only to freeze in absolute horror upon seeing his sister-in-law standing there in her workout clothes. Both of them are completely paralyzed by the sudden intrusion, with him blundering out a panicked exclamation while she gasps in sheer shock. Realizing the gravity of the situation, she quickly slams the door shut, leaving him standing in the hallway to contemplate his dumb mistake. As he stands outside the closed door with his heart hammering against his chest, he wonders why she was even using this particular bathroom when she normally has her own private one in her bedroom. Despite his confusion and embarrassment, his silly mind cannot help but dwell on how incredible her gym physique looked, making it impossible for him to focus on anything else. A moment later, the door slowly creaks open to reveal his sister-in-law, now fully dressed in a casual top and a long floral skirt. Looking incredibly flustered, she sheepishly apologizes for the misunderstanding, explaining that she only used his bathroom because the boiler in her own room was currently broken. Seung frantically waves his hands to reassure his sister-in-law, insisting that he should be the one apologizing for barging in so carelessly. She smiles warmly and tells him that it is perfectly fine, suggesting that they should just forget about the whole incident since they are family now. Seung sheepishly scratches his ear, feeling a strange twinge of disappointment at the word family. She then announces that she will start preparing breakfast and promises to call him once the food is ready, prompting him to agree quietly. As he watches her walk away into the kitchen, the young man realizes that, as expected, he is nothing more than family to her. Soon after, she ties a pink apron around her waist and gets to work in the kitchen. Si-young sits down at the dining table with his older brother Si-jun to eat the breakfast she prepared. Looking down at the spread of eel, mushrooms, and vegetables, Si-young silently notes that they are eating an incredibly healthy meal for this early in the morning. His sister-in-law leans over the counter and voices her concern to Si-jun, stating that his body seems to be feeling quite weak lately and asking if he is doing all right. Si-jun immediately dismisses her worries and directs the attention to his younger brother, suggesting she look after Si-young instead, since his face has been looking much skinnier recently. Si-young is mildly annoyed by this, wondering why his brother is shifting the focus to him when he is perfectly healthy. When she proposes making a tonic for both of them to prepare for the upcoming summer, Si-jun flatly declines, claiming he is already healthy enough. He then points out that her eyes have become cloudy and her complexion seems off, asking if she wants him to send her to the hospital again. The sister-in-law freezes at his words, visibly hurt by the harsh suggestion. Si-young immediately recognizes that they are referring to the doctor, which is an incredibly sussy topic for his struggling sister-in-law. His brother tries to soften the blow by stating that he is just worried about her, reminding her that they can still live a perfectly good life, even without children, and pointing out that she is only stressing herself out. She looks down in silence before admitting that she has indeed been far too stressed about the whole matter, which Si-jun confirms, noting she has been too sensitive lately. Sitting between them, Si-young eats his food in silence, finding the heavy atmosphere incredibly uncomfortable. Having finished his meal, he stands up from the table, prompting his brother to ask if he is already done eating. Si-young confirms this, explaining that he needs to head out to the bookstore now. He heads to his room and changes into a dark button-up shirt, reflecting on how his sister-in-law is struggling to get a new family member due to his brother's lack of endurance training. After years of unsuccessful efforts, Seung's brother seems to have grown tired of the entire situation, leaving his poor sister-in-law to fret and worry all by herself. Seung soon arrives at his shop, named Seung's Bookstore, and settles in behind the front desk to read. A sudden chime of the entrance bell breaks the silence, and he looks up to deliver his standard welcoming greeting to the customer. He is pleasantly surprised to see his sister-in-law walking through the door, carrying a tiered lunchbox and cheerfully addressing him as the manager. Seung playfully begs her to stop calling him manager, thanking her for going out of her way to bring him food once again. She giggles and insists on the title since he is indeed the manager, announcing that she has brought him some homemade kimbap. She leans over the counter and asks if he likes kimbap, which immediately flusters the idiot as he tries to keep his eyes from wandering. He looks down at the beautifully arranged pieces of kimbap, which she humbly mentions she prepared all by herself. Our monkey boy genuinely praises her work, commenting on how delicious it looks, while she encourages him to hurry up and eat before it gets cold. Feeling a little guilty that she came all this way just to deliver a lunchbox, Seung scratches his head and remarks that this is a bit too much food for just one person. He then looks up at her and asks if she would like to join him and eat together if she is hungry, leaving his sister-in-law staring at him in surprise as her own heart begins to beat rapidly. Hearing Seung's warm invitation, his sister-in-law blushes slightly and agrees to eat a little bit of the food with him. The idiot happily digs in until there is only one single piece of kimbap left in the container, leaning back with a sigh of satisfaction as he declares himself completely full. His sister-in-law giggles at his dramatic display, teasingly pointing out that he barely ate anything and that his stomach is not even showing. Seung can only chuckle and joke that he should probably thank her for pointing out the obvious truth. As they clean up, she notices the lone remaining piece of kimbap in the container, picking it up with a fork and offering to feed it to him directly. Seung immediately panics like an idiot, waving his hands frantically and insisting that he is perfectly capable of eating on his own. She playfully ignores his protests, leaning in close and urging him to just hurry up and eat the final piece since it is only one bite. Unfortunately, her playful nature backfires when her sandal slips, causing her to lose her footing entirely. Seung gasps in sheer shock, lunging forward desperately to catch her before she hits the hard floor. The two of them crash down in a messy heap, with Seung groaning under her weight as they land heavily on the ground. Catching his breath, the young man feels a brief wave of relief that he managed to prevent a nasty fall. However, this relief immediately morphs into sheer terror when he realizes that his hand has landed directly on her hand. Both of them freeze in stunned silence, with Seung paralyzed by his own hands and his sister-in-law gasping in utter embarrassment. Panicking, Seung scrambles backward as if he has been shocked, desperately explaining that his only intention was to stop her from falling. He drops to his knees to apologize profusely, but his kind sister-in-law gently tells him there is absolutely no need to apologize, expressing her gratitude for his quick reflexes. She glances at the clock on the wall and realizes that it is already getting quite late, announcing that she needs to run some grocery errands for dinner and must head out first. Seung can only offer a sheepish farewell as she picks up her things to leave. Before walking out the door, she turns back with a smile and promises to make whatever he wants for lunch next time if he just lets her know. Left alone in the empty bookstore, Seung stands behind the counter and laments how disappointing it is to see her leave so soon, as his foolish heart wanted nothing more than to spend a little more time with her. Night eventually falls, and the moon rises high over the quiet neighborhood. Seung lies wide awake in his bed, staring blankly at the ceiling and finding it completely impossible to fall asleep. His hyperactive mind keeps replaying the day's events, including his sussy accidental morning intrusion in the bathroom and the highly awkward bookstore fall. Sighing deeply as his cheeks turn bright red, he reflects on how many chaotic things happened in a single day and how remarkably beautiful his sister-in-law looked. He clenches his fist in frustration, scolding himself that he has no business concerning himself with a married woman, yet he still cannot help but wish he could train her fat-burning cardio. Just as his thoughts start to wander a bit too far, a sudden mental image of his older brother, Sejun, asking him warmly how work is going pops into his head. Horrified by his own guilt, Seung forcefully slaps both sides of his face to wake himself up, loudly scolding himself for letting his mind drift into such foolish territory. He firmly concludes that no matter how perfectly she fits his ideal type, she remains his brother's devoted wife who genuinely cares for him as family, and he needs to start acting like a sensible person instead of a lovesick monkey. Realizing that his mind is spiraling completely out of control, Seung decides he desperately needs a cup of cold water to cool himself down before he loses his sanity like a total idiot. He quietly slips out of bed and heads down to the kitchen, pouring himself a refreshing drink in hopes of washing away his sussy thoughts. However, just as he gulps down the cold water, his ears catch a faint, rhythmic sigh echoing through the quiet house. He pauses in confusion, trying to identify the source of the strange proper noise, while remembering that his older brother is currently away on a business trip. Curiosity getting the better of this clueless dummy, Seong silently sneaks down the hallway toward the room where a warm glow of light leaks through a slightly open door. He gently nudges the door further open to peek inside, only for his eyes to widen in absolute shock at the scene unfolding before him. Through the narrow crack, he witnesses his sister-in-law on the bed, strengthening her hand grip to ease her deep tension and loneliness. The young man stands completely frozen, utterly transfixed by the sight as she continues her breathless self-strengthening, completely oblivious to her brother-in-law standing right outside her bedroom door. Standing by the cracked door, Seong is completely overwhelmed by the scene, feeling all the guilt that was haunting him just moments ago completely melt away as he continues to peek at his sister-in-law. This hopeless dummy gets so caught up in the moment that he desires to see even more exercise, his reaction making his internal conflict worse by the second. However, his reckless behavior catches up to him when he accidentally bumps his foot against the door, causing a sharp creaking sound to echo through the hallway. Seong freezes in absolute panic, realizing he has made a massive blunder. Inside the room, his sister-in-law immediately halts her hand grip strengthening, gasping in surprise and turning her head toward the door to see if someone is there. She quickly covers herself and pulls the door open to investigate the silent hallway. Fortunately for our idiot, he manages to scramble around the corner just in time, pressing himself against the wall while sweating profusely and realizing how incredibly close he came to getting into deep trouble. His sister-in-law peers into the dark, empty corridor, ultimately assuming she must have simply heard something wrong before heading back inside. Back in his own bed, the idiot lets out a frustrated sigh, thoroughly annoyed with himself as he wonders why on earth he keeps having these highly sussy thoughts about his brother's wife. Just as he tries to settle down, a sudden knock on his door startles him, and he sits straight up as he hears his sister-in-law calling out to him from the hallway. His overactive imagination immediately plays a wild, proper daydream of her walking in completely improper clothes and begging him for an endurance training, prompting him to shake his head frantically to clear the illusion. He clears his throat and tells her that he is indeed still awake, inviting her to come in. She slowly steps into the room, and Seong gathers his composure to ask what could possibly bring her to his bedroom at such a late hour. Looking at her face, his heart starts pounding as he wonders if his wild daydream is actually about to come true. However, she quickly dispels his silly hopes, explaining that she came to ask if he had happened to walk past her room earlier. She sheepishly admits that she had been tossing and turning in bed, and she was terribly worried that he might have witnessed her hand grip strengthening session. Realizing she is trying to verify if he caught her, our idiot quickly plays it cool, scratching his head and lying smoothly that he did not go downstairs at all today. She lets out a massive sigh of relief, thanking goodness before bidding him good night and preparing to leave. Seong watches her go, feeling a bit of a disappointment and wondering if she really came all this way just to ask that. But before closing the door, she turns back and asks if he has some free time tomorrow to accompany her to a yoga center inside the department store. Seong is a bit confused, but when she mentions she has a lecture to attend there anyway and suggests they go together, he readily agrees. She beams with joy, telling him she is looking forward to their drive tomorrow and playfully instructing him to wear nice clothes. After she leaves, Seong is left sitting on his bed with a racing heart, completely baffled by what she could possibly mean by wanting him to dress nicely. The following afternoon finds Seong back at his bookstore, anxiously checking his phone only to see that it is already past 3 o'clock. He notes that Yunhee is quite late, realizing he really should have picked up his sister-in-law by now. Knowing how exceptionally punctual she always is, he begins to worry, wondering if she might have gotten into some sort of accident on her way. As he paces around the store, desperately hoping nothing bad has happened, a bright voice suddenly calls out behind him, welcoming him as the president. Seong is so startled by the sudden greeting that he bumps right into the speaker, letting out a pained grunt as he collides with a blonde woman. She looks at him in complete surprise, asking why on earth he was just standing right there in the way. Seong holds his head in pain, groaning from the sudden collision with his blonde employee, Yunhee. He rubs his bruised forehead and complains about her being late, only for a completely baffled Yunhee to state that she is not late at all. Suddenly she gasps as she realizes she completely forgot to read his message from earlier that morning. Bowing down in a frantic apology, she wishes him good luck and quickly makes her escape, leaving the poor guy to deal with the painful bump on his head all by himself. Shortly after, Seong and his sister-in-law arrive at the department store, parking their car in the underground lot. She beams and thanks him sweetly for driving her, but her smile quickly fades into concern as she notices the prominent lump on his forehead and asks if he is all right. Seung can only offer an awkward, embarrassed laugh as he tries to downplay the injury. Determined to inspect the damage, his sister-in-law leans, insisting on taking a look to make sure it is nothing serious. This close proximity completely breaks Seung's focus, and he helplessly finds his eyes wandering to her hands, silently admiring how pretty she looks up close. Before he can compose himself, she gasps and abruptly pulls back, blushing deeply as she apologizes for touching him without his permission. The idiot scratches his head in embarrassment, assuring her that it is perfectly fine, but his brain completely short-circuits as he accidentally blurts out aloud that she is incredibly cute. Realizing his monumental blunder, Seung freezes in absolute horror while his sister-in-law stares at him in complete shock, stuttering to clarify what he just said. Desperately backpedaling to save himself, he frantically waves his hands and stammers that he did not mean cute in a sussy way, but rather that she is energetic like a wild animal. Fortunately for this bumbling idiot, she bursts into a fit of giggles, admitting that it has been a very long time since anyone called her cute and that it actually made her feel quite nice, playfully teasing him that he is the one who is actually cuter. Relieved that she took it so well, Seung starts to wonder if he should take a leap of faith and invite her out for a meal afterward. However, she suddenly checks her phone and gasps, warning him that they are going to be late and urging him to hurry as she exits the car, leaving him to follow her with a sigh. The two of them make their way into the bustling department store, riding the escalator up together. Seung notices his sister-in-law scanning the crowd anxiously, wondering exactly who she is searching for so intensely. Her face lights up as she spots a woman in purple workout gear waving at them from a distance. As they approach, his sister-in-law introduces the newcomer as Lena, who warmly introduces herself to Seung as Yurina, the yoga teacher. His sister-in-law happily explains that Yurina had always expressed a strong desire to meet Seung whenever his name came up, which is the sole reason she begged him to come along today. Seung quietly looks at Yurina, realizing that he has actually seen her around once in a while. Before Seung can even process the introduction, his sister-in-law abruptly waves goodbye, cheerfully announcing that she needs to go somewhere else for a little while, and leaving the two of them alone. Standing there in awkward silence, the truth of the situation finally dawns on Seung, as he realizes that, no matter how he tries to sugarcoat it, his sister-in-law brought him here on a blind date to introduce him to the yoga teacher. He stands there in silent disappointment, realizing that she simply wants him to find someone else and become independent soon, before Yurina politely breaks the silence by addressing him. Snapping out of his deep, disappointing thoughts with a sudden start, Seung quickly tries to collect himself and focus on his companion. Leaning in, the yoga teacher peers directly into his eyes, curious about what has been on his mind and wondering why he is suddenly making such a dark, brooding expression. This idiot can only stand there in silence, highly flustered by how closely she is standing in front of him. Yurina smiles sympathetically, concluding that he must be having an incredibly difficult and exhausting time lately. Scratching his head sheepishly, Seung lets out a nervous, self-deprecating laugh, readily admitting that she is absolutely right about his stress. Gazing up at him with a warm and playful expression, the yoga teacher then sweetens her sympathetic attitude by asking if she should use a little comforting exercise to help ease his tension and relieve his exhaustion. Later, as the other students wrap up their session and prepare to head home, Seung arrives at the quiet yoga studio. He slides the wooden door open and politely peeks his head inside, asking if the instructor, Yurina, is currently available. Turning away from her phone with a bright smile, Yurina welcomes him warmly, noting that he has arrived at the absolute perfect time. She instructs Seung to change into his workout gear, which instantly makes this hopeless dummy blush as he gets a close-up look at her tight athletic outfit. As he heads to change, Seung's sweat drops, realizing that his earlier wild daydreams were completely ridiculous and that she was only talking about a standard, hands-on yoga stretch when she offered to touch him. A few minutes later, Seung is lying flat on a blue yoga mat, trembling and groaning in agony as he attempts a deep forward fold. Yurina gently instructs him to slowly exhale, climbing onto his back to press down on his hips and urging him to hold the painful position just a little longer. In this incredibly bent-over position, the physical strain is so intense that Seung's mind goes completely blank, leading him to conclude that yoga is infinitely harder than he originally anticipated, though he admits the deep stretch is highly effective. Sitting up and panting heavily, Seung is caught completely off guard when Yurina stands beside him and suggests that they try big bad yoga next. He looks up in surprise, but she points out that practicing together is far less boring than exercising all by himself. Following her directions, Seung nervously positions himself directly in front of her. Yurina performs a wide leg split on the mat and instructs him to place his hands firmly on her hands while using his knees to press down on her hips to assist her with the deep stretch. He gingerly places his hands on her legs, silently wondering if he is doing this correctly as she praises his positioning. She then instructs him to tilt his upper body forward, put strength into his muscles, and hold the pose. Seung is completely flustered by the sudden, intense strains, silently questioning if normal yoga is always this sussy, but he dutifully complies by grasping her thighs and slowly tilting his weight forward as she lies flat on her back. The physical effort is so exhausting that Seung's body shakes violently, and he internally complains about how incredibly tiring this exercise is. As he struggles to hold himself up over her, she smiles warmly and lets out a relaxed sigh. Suddenly, Yurina wraps her legs tightly around Seung's hands, locking her ankles behind his back to pull him down. Seung gasps in utter shock, frantically asking what on earth she is doing to him. Yurina simply giggles, playfully admitting that she is just teaching him because her hardworking student looks so adorable trying his best. Seung continues to tremble under the sudden pressure, panicking that applying weight like this is making it impossible for him to maintain his balance. As Seung maintains his precarious balance over Yurina, the physical strain of the intense yoga stretch becomes far too tight, and their bodies end up making sweats. Yurina gasps in mild surprise at the sudden collision, while Seung sweats profusely, completely frozen in utter mortification. This clueless idiot instantly despairs, realizing his reputation is completely ruined and lamenting that he is about to be branded a total disgrace simply because his body had an uncontrollable response to the rigorous exercise. Looking down at her with a red, apologetic face, Seung quietly asks why she would choose to play such a sussy and suggestive prank, especially on someone she barely even knows. Yurina only smiles warmly, placing her hand gently on his side and revealing that she actually knows him quite well because she often watched him as he walked past her studio. Seung has a brief realization, recalling the moments he had looked up from his book at the store and noticed her walking by on the street outside. Yurina confesses that she had always felt mysteriously drawn toward him, and by pure coincidence, she discovered his identity while chatting with one of her yoga members, who turned out to be Seung's very own sister-in-law. Armed with this knowledge, she had eagerly requested the introduction, leaving Seung completely stunned as he finally understood the true story behind their meeting. Back in the present, Yurina reaches out to comfort him, gently telling him to put aside his embarrassment and follow his true feelings rather than holding back. Seung, highly flustered and struggling to maintain his composure, warns her that she might end up regretting her reckless actions later. Looking up at him with absolute confidence, the yoga teacher asks what on earth she would possibly regret, warmly reassuring him that this calorie-burning session is exactly what she wants. Night has fallen over the two-story brick house, and inside, Sejun lies wide awake in bed with his wife Yeonhee, resting her head against his shoulder. He cannot help but grumble about his younger brother Seung, wondering if the idiot is out seeing someone since he is never usually late, yet has still not returned home tonight. Noticing her husband's restlessness, Yeonhee shifts in bed and listens as Sejun asks if she has received any messages from Seung. Feeling a bit startled, she quickly denies hearing anything, though her thoughts immediately drift to her brother-in-law. Leaning over Sejun, she gently suggests that Seung should really find a partner and get married soon. Sejun lazily looks up, simply muttering a brief inquiry about whether that is truly the case, which Yeonhee softly confirms. Seeing an opportunity with Seung away from the house, Yeonhee grows playful and reminds her husband that they are completely alone. Sejun, acting like a bit of a dense dummy, wonders why his brother's absence matters, prompting Yeonhee to blushingly declare that this is their perfect chance to try fat-burning cardio. Sejun remains silent for a moment, looking quite overwhelmed as his wife eagerly waits for his response. With a heavy sigh, Sejun finally sits up and holds her hand, telling her that he agrees and instructing her to wear exercise clothes. However, the poor woman's hopes are immediately shattered when her exhausted husband instantly falls flat on his back, snoring loudly and drifting into a deep sleep before fat-burning cardio can even start. Left completely rejected and frustrated, Yeonhee can only sit in the quiet room with tears welling up in her eyes, utterly disappointed by her husband's complete lack of endurance. Later that night, under the starry sky, footsteps echo outside the gate as Seung finally makes his way back to the house. He reflects on how late it has gotten, realizing he lost track of time because he was busy having fun and sharing drinks with the yoga teacher, Yurina. Slipping quietly through the front door, our clueless monkey wonders if his older brother is already asleep, only to notice a soft light glowing down the hallway. Realizing someone is still awake despite the late hour, Seung cautiously creeps into the dining area to investigate. He freezes in absolute surprise upon stepping into the kitchen, finding his sister-in-law slumped over the table, seemingly passed out after drinking a bottle of soju all by herself. She lets out a heavy sigh as she sleeps, completely unaware of her brother-in-law's presence. Si-young quickly covers his mouth against the strong smell of alcohol, deeply confused as to why his sister-in-law would be drinking so heavily when she normally avoids alcohol entirely, and he wonders if something bad has happened to her. As he looks down at her deep slumber, his inner idiot briefly takes over, and he finds his eyes wandering to her form as he experiences a sudden, highly sussy desire to do endurance training with her. Realizing what a total creep he is, Si-young forcefully shakes his head and berates himself, wondering what on earth he is thinking, and concluding that he must be losing his mind. Deciding to act like a sensible person instead of a lovesick monkey, Si-young gently shakes her shoulder and calls out to her, urging her to wake up before she catches a cold, sleeping in the drafty dining room. Yeon-hee groans softly in response, slowly opening her eyes to look up at him with a flushed, heavily intoxicated expression. In that brief moment, our idiot is completely struck by her beauty, silently realizing that she looks far more attractive than the yoga teacher, Yurina. However, the heavily drunk woman blurs her vision and mistakes him for her husband, softly calling him by his brother's name. Si-young freezes in absolute shock, realizing she must be so drunk that she is mistaking him for Si-jun, and he quickly blushes as he tries to correct her by stating that he is not his older brother. Before he can step away, Yeon-hee suddenly grabs his wrists in a tight grip and pulls him, pleadingly asking if they can continue fat-burning cardio like they were doing before. Si-young's mind completely breaks into confusion as he wonders what on earth she could possibly be talking about, especially when she sleepily mentions that she was not left very satisfied. Realizing just how incredibly drunk his sister-in-law is, Si-young gasps in shock as she suddenly pulls him down into an unexpected, sussy moment. His eyes widen in sheer horror at the sudden scene, and he desperately concludes that they absolutely cannot go any further than this. After she pulls back and sleepily mutters her husband's name once more, Si-young seizes the opportunity to escape. Retreating like a total coward, he flees the kitchen and rushes straight to his room, slamming the door shut to hide in the safety of the darkness. The next morning, bright sunshine pours through the bedroom window, but Si-young lies flat on his back, staring blankly at the ceiling after failing to get a single wink of sleep all night. Sitting up in bed with a heavy sigh, his hyperactive mind keeps replaying the sussy scene from the night before, leaving him holding his head in utter despair as he wonders how he can possibly look his sister-in-law in the face ever again. Hearing soft footsteps on the stairs, his anxiety spikes as he nervously worries about whether she will actually remember the embarrassing events of last night. Gingerly walking down the stairs to face his fate, Si-young is suddenly startled to see his older brother, Si-jun, entering through the front door with his briefcase. Si-young calls out to him, but his guilty conscience immediately makes him panic, wondering if his brother somehow knows about the chaotic scene. However, Si-jun simply lets out a tired sigh and casually mentions that Yeon-hee is currently out cold upstairs, leaving Si-young relieved but still deeply stressed by the dramatic night. Standing in the hallway, Si-young feels a massive wave of relief wash over him as his older brother, Si-jun, mutters that he has absolutely no idea why his wife drank so much last night. Entirely oblivious to the chaotic event that took place, Si-jun casually tells Si-young to make his own breakfast and get ready to head out to the bookstore soon. Si-young quickly bids him a good day, watching his brother leave before reflecting on how deeply asleep Yeon-hee must be after her intense drinking session. Just as he is contemplating last night's events, a faint groan of pain echoes from his sister-in-law's bedroom, immediately catching his attention. Curiosity and concern getting the better of him, Si-young walks over to her door, giving it a polite knock before announcing his entry and stepping inside. He finds Yeon-hee sitting up in bed, weakly holding her head and complaining about a painful headache. Calling out to her gently, Si-young is momentarily paralyzed by her appearance, feeling his heart race all over again. Yeon-hee slowly looks up, surprised to see her brother-in-law standing there. Si-young explains that he heard about her heavy drinking from his brother, prompting her to sheepishly chuckle and admit that she is feeling quite dizzy, though she reassures him that it is merely a minor hangover. As she sweetly thanks him for worrying about her, Si-young has a sudden realization when he notices her completely calm demeanor. He deduces that she has absolutely no memory of their sussy scene from the night before, and a light bulb practically goes off in his head. Relieved by this lucky turn of events, Si-young tells her to wait a moment and runs off, returning shortly after to present her with a warm mug. Yeon-hee curiously asks if the drink is honey water, to which Si-young explains that he drinks it every time he consumes alcohol because it is incredibly effective for curing hangovers. Smiling warmly, he bids her goodbye and announces that he is finally heading off to work. Left alone in her bed, Yeon-hee takes a gentle sip of the warm drink, quietly noting how incredibly sweet it tastes. Later that day at the bookstore, Si-young's clumsy employee, Yeon-hee, is standing precariously on a step stool, her legs trembling violently as she struggles to reach the top shelf. Si-young sits nearby, completely ignoring her struggles as his mind remains hopelessly occupied with thoughts of last night's scene, tormenting himself over the fact that Young-hee is, after all, his brother's wife. Distracted by Young-hee's loud, repeated grunts of frustration, Si-young snaps out of his deep thoughts and sharply orders her to be quiet while she is working. Startled by his sudden outburst, the blonde turns around to complain, asking why her tall boss cannot just lend a hand to make the job easier. Si-young only responds with a smug grin, pointing out that he is the boss while she is merely the part-timer, leaving her to huff in annoyance. Finding her angry reaction rather cute, Si-young watches as she turns back to her task, only for her foot to suddenly slip on the wobbly steps. Losing her balance completely, the poor girl drops her book and crashes heavily to the floor, groaning in pain as Si-young looks on in surprise. As she falls off the step stool, Young-hee lands directly on top of Si-young, pinning him to the floor in an incredibly sussy position. Our absolute idiot of a boss groans in agony under her weight, his face turning bright red as he struggles to endure the sudden impact. Flushed with embarrassment, the clumsy part-timer lets out a soft sound of pain and confusion, completely paralyzed by how sussily they have collided. Still on the floor, a panicked Young-hee quickly apologizes, desperately stammering that she will get off him right away. However, as she shifts around on his lap, Si-young is left sweating profusely, silently questioning if she just let out a soft groan under the awkward contact. To make matters worse, the clumsy employee blushes deeply and pants, explaining that her legs have suddenly lost all their strength, leaving her completely stuck on his lap. As she frantically wonders how she is supposed to stand up, Si-young's sussy mind keeps drifting back to his sister-in-law, Young-hee. He nervously warns her that she needs to stop moving around like that, prompting a highly confused Young-hee to look back and ask what exactly she has done. Before Si-young can explain, Young-hee notices a very prominent workout gear pressed against her. Blushing furiously, she innocently wonders what on earth is near her, reaching her hand to investigate. She gingerly touches the machine, innocently concluding that it feels incredibly new and good, and she wonders aloud if it is simply his mobile phone. Si-young's eyes nearly pop out of his head in sheer horror as he panics over why she is touching the workout tool and what will happen if she continues. A second later, the horrifying truth finally dawns on the poor blonde, and her face turns completely pale with shock. Screaming at the top of her lungs, her loud shriek echoes all the way outside the bookstore. After the chaotic scene finally calms down, Young-hee sits in an office chair, blushing and panting heavily as she sheepishly apologizes for the incredibly awkward misunderstanding. Si-young, sitting behind her and staring blankly at the ceiling in mortification, tries to reassure her that it is perfectly fine, since she did not do it on purpose, though he internally laments how unbelievably embarrassing the whole situation is. Trying to make amends, Young-hee turns around and makes a highly bizarre proposal, suggesting that while it might sound weird, she is willing to let him do fat-burning cardio to make things even. Si-young's brain completely short-circuits in utter disbelief, silently screaming in panic as he questions what on earth she is saying and why she would make such an unfair, ridiculous offer. Looking at her, our hopeless dummy's hyperactive imagination suddenly takes over, plunging him into a wild and highly sussy daydream where he actually takes her up on the suggestive offer, completely losing his sanity as his thoughts once again get confused with his sister-in-law, Young-hee. Realizing his mind is spiraling into dangerously crazy territory, Si-young forcefully closes his eyes and scolds himself for having such ridiculous thoughts. To break the awkward tension and snap himself back to reality, he reaches out and delivers a sharp, playful flick directly to Young-hee's forehead, leaving his complaining employee rubbing her bruised head in pain. Nursing her freshly flicked forehead, Young-hee rubs her head in pain, while Si-young sternly lectures her, telling her that she absolutely should not say such highly sussy things to people. Si-young tries to soothe the situation by telling her not to worry about it, prompting a pouting Young-hee to weakly claim she is fine. Still, she huffs in disappointment, muttering that she was actually going to let him train a cute university student. Si-young, acting like a protective older brother, scolds her again, telling her she definitely shouldn't make such offers to just anyone. Highly offended by his phrasing, Young-hee stands up and blushes furiously, yelling that she doesn't just say these things to anyone, and that she only offered because he is her boss. However, before she can finish her explanation, Si-young's phone vibrates, and he happily notes that the yoga teacher, Yurina, is messaging him, leaving his poor employee pouting in frustration. Later that evening, Si-young arrives at the bustling department store, anxiously pacing around and checking his phone as he realizes Yurina is running quite late. Wondering if she is simply too busy, his thoughts are interrupted by the rhythmic clicking of high heels approaching from behind. Turning around, Si-young is pleased to see Yurina arriving, but his smile quickly fades into absolute confusion when he notices his sister-in-law walking right beside her. Yurina apologizes sweetly for keeping him waiting, but Seung can only focus on his sister-in-law, silently wondering why she is here. Yurina quickly explains that they were together because his sister-in-law had kindly helped her tidy up the studio after her class finished. Seung awkwardly nods in understanding, internally reflecting that he really did not want his sister-in-law to see him out on a date. Things quickly get even more awkward when Yurina suddenly grabs Seung's arm. Seung flinches in surprise, but Yurina playfully asks what is wrong, wondering if they weren't already progressing in their partnership. Desperately sweating, Seung whispers that it is highly embarrassing to behave like this with his sister-in-law watching. But Yurina simply dismisses his worries. Watching them with a warm chuckle, his sister-in-law remarks that seeing how close they are makes her feel like she made the absolute right choice in introducing them. She then teasingly tells Seung that she is leaving her yoga teacher in his capable hands before bidding them a pleasant good night and walking away. Seung can only watch her go, his heart sinking with a strange twinge of guilt. Yurina beams, calling his sister-in-law exceptionally witty, but Seung remains distracted by his thoughts. When Yurina playfully calls him her brother-in-law and urges him to hurry up, Seung quickly and firmly corrects her, stating that he is definitely not her brother-in-law. Under the dark night sky, Yurina leads Seung directly to the entrance of a towering luxury building, leaving the young man completely stunned when he realizes they have arrived at a hotel. Walking into the lobby of the class gym, Seung nervously points out that she spoke as if they were merely going on a standard outing, yet they have bypassed all of that and headed straight to a gym. Yurina only delivers a sussy grin, declaring that she simply wants to take proper revenge for their intense encounter the day before. Swiping her card to open the door, Yurina welcomes him into a stunningly beautiful suite. Seung looks around in awe, admitting that it is an incredibly nice gym, which Yurina proudly confirms, noting she booked such a high-end room on purpose. Suddenly, her playful smile shifts to a much more serious expression as she steps in, leaving our flustered dummy to nervously ask what is going on. Standing inside the gym, Yurina looks at Seung with a sly smile, claiming that she has been burning with passion ever since their encounter yesterday, and asking if he is going to take full responsibility. Seung is momentarily taken aback by her sussy words, but before our hopeless dummy can even reply, Yurina walks and begins to make him comfortable. Determined not to let her have the upper hand, Seung decides there is absolutely no chance he is letting her dictate the pace today. He suddenly grabs her by the hand, completely turning the tables by pushing her flat onto the gym floor. As he stands over her and begins to tighten his hands, he confidently declares that unlike yesterday, he is the one who is going to train and discipline her. Yurina lies on her back with her heart pounding in nervous excitement, watching as Seung prepares to join her. He locks his gaze onto her, firmly warning her not to even think about losing her mind as he prepares for a full-body training session. Bright morning light floods the city streets as Seung drives back to his bookstore, feeling completely exhausted after waking up and sharing another full-body training session with Yurina. He notes that because of their late night and early morning activities, he ended up leaving way past the bookstore's usual opening time. Sighing deeply as he grips the steering wheel, he reflects that while he certainly felt good, his energy has been entirely drained, leaving him doubting whether he can even work properly today. Rubbing his head lazily, he concludes that he will just have to open the store a little late, reassuring himself that there are usually very few morning customers anyway. However, as he pulls up to the shop, his eyes widen in surprise as he spots a familiar silhouette waiting right outside the entrance. Recognizing his sister-in-law, Yeonhee, pouting and checking her watch, he parks the car and quickly walks up to greet her. Deeply confused by her presence so early in the morning, Seung asks what she is doing here. Yeonhee turns to him with a deeply annoyed expression, prompting our clueless monkey to nervously wonder why she is making such a cross face. Before he can ask any further, she sharply asks if he even knows what time it is. Seung sheepishly guesses that it is around 10 o'clock, which Yeonhee sternly confirms, pointing out that the bookstore was supposed to open at 9. She explains that since he never came home last night and the store remained closed this morning, she had been incredibly worried about him. Seung's heart begins to thump in his chest as the realization dawns on him, feeling a sudden, foolish wave of happiness at the fact that she was actually worried. Apologizing sheepishly, Seung scratches his head and asks why she didn't just call him, to which she explains that his phone was completely switched off. Seung quickly checks his phone, realizing he forgot to charge it in his rush to leave Yurina's room. Leaning in close with a playful pout, Yeonhee teases him, suggesting that her worries were entirely meaningless, since he was obviously busy spending the night with the yoga instructor. Feeling a bit guilty, Seung admits that while he didn't want her to find out, he confirms her suspicion, noting that she was the one who wanted him to get along well with Yurina in the first place. Yeon-hee holds her lunchbox tightly and quietly agrees, muttering that Yurina is indeed a very good person. Grateful for her matchmaking efforts, Seyoung offers a sheepish laugh and thanks her before pulling out his keys to unlock the bookstore door. He warmly invites her inside, suggesting she rest from waiting and let him get her a cold drink. However, Yeon-hee politely declines, explaining that she only came by to deliver a tiered lunchbox so he wouldn't skip breakfast. Handing over the food, she tells him to eat well and do his best today. Seyoung takes the container, feeling a bit disappointed as he tries to convince her to stay, but she insists that she must rush back home to finish her housework. Just as Seyoung is lamenting her early departure, the loud ringing of the bookstore landline phone suddenly echoes through the shop. Yeon-hee urges him to hurry up and answer it, wondering who could possibly be calling so early. Seyoung picks up the red receiver, only for his clumsy blonde employee Young-hee to loudly scream through the line, angrily demanding to know why on earth his mobile phone has been switched off all morning. On the other end of the line, his employee Young-hee lets out a tired sigh and explains that she won't be able to come to work this afternoon, prompting Seyoung to ask why she cannot make it. Seyoung watches his sister-in-law, Yeon-hee, walk toward the door while Young-hee continues to explain that today is her final assignment deadline and her professor will fail her with an F if she doesn't submit it today. Seyoung silently notes that his stubborn part-timer has obviously been slacking off again, but he tries to remain understanding, telling her that he gets it but she must make sure to come to work tomorrow. After hearing a whiny apology from the girl, Seyoung lets out a heavy sigh and hangs up the red receiver. He feels completely stuck, wondering what he is supposed to do since he has a lot of work to finish this afternoon. Hearing his sigh, Yeon-hee stops her departure and walks back to the counter, calling out to her brother-in-law and asking if the part-timer just called to say she won't be coming in. Seyoung scratches his head with an awkward, nervous laugh, admitting that is pretty much the case. He reflects on how exceptionally busy he is today, silently grumbling that he definitely needs to scold his lazy brat of an employee the next time he sees her. Before he can stress any further, Yeon-hee looks at him with a racing heart and softly proposes helping him out at the store today. Seyoung blinks in surprise, asking her to repeat what she just said in absolute disbelief. Placing a hand over her chest with a confident smile, Yeon-hee proudly declares that she is actually an unexpectedly useful woman. It is a bright, sunny day at Seyoung's bookstore, where stacks of heavy books are piled high all over the floor. Having stepped up to help her brother-in-law, Yeon-hee finds herself doing some serious heavy lifting, struggling under the weight of the massive volumes and letting out a soft grunt as she carefully bends over to set them down. Wiping the sweat from her brow with a tired sigh, she finally declares that they are finished with the hard work, prompting Seyoung to look up in quiet admiration. He turns to her with genuine gratitude, thanking his sister-in-law for her invaluable help, which she warmly dismisses, expressing her relief that she was able to be of assistance. Seeing how exhausted she is, Seyoung suggests she take a quick rest while he wraps up the remaining work, proposing to treat her to some tea to show his appreciation. However, his sister-in-law looks at him with sudden disappointment, realizing he is planning to send her home. When Seyoung innocently points out that she had mentioned being busy with housework, she can only look away in quiet frustration. Clueless as ever, Seyoung wonders why on earth she seems so down, completely missing the shift in her mood, until she suddenly clutches her shoulder with soft groans of pain. He anxiously asks what is wrong, and she explains that lifting all those heavy books has left her shoulders incredibly sore, leaving her wondering how she is supposed to go home and get any chores done at this rate. Realizing he pushed his sister-in-law a bit too hard, Seyoung feels a deep wave of guilt, especially when she pointedly remarks that a massage is the absolute best remedy for a sore shoulder, and wonders aloud if there is anyone around who could help her out. Believing the situation is entirely his fault, our hesitant bookstore manager steps forward and nervously asks if he can be the one to give her a massage to ease the tension. Yeon-hee's eyes light up with subtle satisfaction as she happily accepts his offer, telling him she will be waiting patiently while he finishes up. As Seyoung watches her walk over to the counter, his heart begins to beat rapidly in his chest, and this hopeless dummy cannot help but think that his usually mature sister-in-law seems to have become incredibly cute today. Seyoung soon joins her behind the counter, swallowing hard as the sheer nervousness of the situation begins to set in. He stands behind her, his hands trembling and his heart hammering against his ribs as he realizes that actually going through with the massage is infinitely more stressful than simply offering it. However, before they can even get started, the bookstore's entrance bell chimes and a male customer walks through the door, calling out a casual greeting. Hearing no response, the customer wanders further into the shop to see if anyone is around, only to peer over the counter and freeze in absolute shock. Right there behind the desk, Seyoung is caught in an incredibly cardiovascular training session with his sister-in-law. leaving the two of them paralyzed in sheer mortification as their hearts pound wildly in the awkward silence. Seung and his sister-in-law freeze in absolute horror, staring wide-eyed at each other as the sudden intrusion catches them completely off guard. Just on the other side of the high counter, the confused customer looks around the seemingly empty reception area, wondering if anyone is actually working today. Hearing nothing but silence, the man begins to suspect that the manager might be up on the second floor, slowly making his way toward the staircase. Down on the floor, Seung and Yunhee huddle together in a desperate attempt to stay out of sight, with Yunhee pressing herself tightly against the floor to avoid detection. Our idiot can only hold his breath and pray they won't be discovered, his heart hammering wildly against his ribs as the customer's heavy footsteps echo from the staircase. Just when it seems like their luck might run out, the shop's entrance bell chimes loudly as a young woman calls out from the doorway, impatiently complaining to her boyfriend that they are going to miss their movie if he doesn't hurry up. Realizing how late it is, the customer quickly calls back that he is on his way, hurrying down the stairs and apologizing to his annoyed partner as they finally make their exit together. As the front door swings shut and a peaceful silence returns to the bookstore, Seung lets out a massive, trembling sigh of relief. Slowly pulling himself up from the cramped floor, Seung silently thanks his lucky stars that they weren't caught red-handed in such an incredibly sussy position. However, the tension in the room only thickens when Yunhee, still sitting on the floor with highly flushed cheeks, softly calls out his name. She looks down in hesitation, her heart beating rapidly as she quietly confesses that even though she is married to his older brother, Sejun, she finds herself feeling incredibly confused and uncertain lately. Seung stands over her in stunned silence, deeply affected by her words as she struggles to articulate her thoughts. Sensing the heavy weight of her confession, our bumbling manager decides to gently ease the mood, softly reminding her that their unfinished cardiovascular training isn't quite over yet. Caught completely off guard by his gentle intervention, Yunhee blinks in surprise before looking down with a warm, shy blush, quietly agreeing that they still have some tension to work out. Later, back at the bookstore, Seung slowly wears up his crisp white shirt while his sister-in-law, Yunhee, carefully adjusts her jacket behind him. Glancing back at her, this hopeless dummy is completely transfixed by her elegance, silently reflecting on how incredibly beautiful she is. Suddenly, Yunhee gasps in surprise as she spots the clock on the wall, realizing it is already late in the afternoon and she still needs to buy groceries for dinner. Seeing her panic, Seung kindly offers to drive her to the store, leaving his sister-in-law staring at him in stunned surprise before she happily accepts the gesture. Shortly after, the two arrive at a massive warehouse-style supermarket. As Seung pushes their metal cart through the aisles, Yunhee voices her concern, asking if it is really alright for him to close down the bookstore early. Our reassuring manager quickly tells her not to worry, explaining that since it is Wednesday, business is usually slow anyway, and he has a few things of his own to buy. Her worries immediately melt away when she spots a massive sign advertising a special discount on fruit. Excitedly running over to the display, she happily grabs a ripe mango, cheerfully noting that they are only on sale today. She eagerly explains that while she absolutely loves mangoes, they are usually far too expensive for her to buy, teasingly suggesting that they must have gotten lucky simply because they came shopping together. Chuckling at her enthusiastic reaction, Seung playfully thinks to himself that she looks like she belongs in a professional commercial. As he watches her smile, his mind drifts back to the incredible cardiovascular training moments they had shared just a short while ago back at the bookstore, leaving him completely baffled by his own luck and unable to believe how quickly things have shifted between them. Their pleasant afternoon is suddenly interrupted by a friendly lady working at a nearby food tasting stand, who cheerfully greets Yunhee as a newlywed and expresses surprise at seeing her with her husband today. Flustered by the sudden misunderstanding, Yunhee nervously greets her back, but the talkative employee immediately turns her attention to Seung, playfully lecturing him for letting his beautiful partner shop all by herself and urging him to help carry the heavy bags. Seung silently realizes that his older brother has apparently never accompanied Yunhee to the grocery store, leaving her to handle the chores alone. As Seung tries to clear up the confusion, he hesitates for a brief moment before deciding to playfully go along with the lady's advice. With a warm smile, he politely promises the clerk that he will make sure his beautiful partner never has a hard time again, leaving his poor sister-in-law standing there in absolute shock as her heart begins to pound wildly against her chest. As the warm glow of the sunset paints the sky, Seung and his sister-in-law, Yunhee, walk home together from the supermarket. Carrying the heavy grocery bags, Seung listens as Yunhee nervously questions whether he really had to make such a sussy claim to the clerk back at the store. Our daring manager casually shrugs it off, suggesting she should probably get used to hearing those kinds of things, since he sincerely loves her and meant every word he said. Yeonhee's heart flutters, but she quickly tries to restore boundaries, softly reminding him that he shouldn't harbor such feelings for her, because she is, after all, his older brother's partner. She quietly points out that continuing down this path is far too dangerous for both of them, and carrying on like this will only lead to trouble. Walking in silence under the twilight, Seyoung silently admits to himself that his sister-in-law is completely right. Yet, despite knowing the risks, this lovesick manager cannot help but realize that living so close to her has completely wavered his heart, making it impossible to ignore his growing feelings. Night eventually falls over the brick house, and inside the quiet kitchen, Yeonhee stands by the counter slicing carrots. Her mind is in complete turmoil as she repeatedly tells herself that their recent encounter at the bookstore was a massive mistake that must never happen again. She knows she must maintain proper boundaries, but as she touches her racing chest, she is forced to admit to herself that she has never experienced such sussy, uncontrollable feelings before, making her wonder how long she can actually hold back. Breaking her deep thoughts, Seyoung lazily wanders downstairs barefoot, rubbing his neck and reflecting on how exhausted he feels. Spotting his sister-in-law at the counter, he politely asks if she needs any help preparing dinner. Startled out of her senses, a flushing Yeonhee quickly declines, reminding herself that she must not harbor sussy feelings for her brother-in-law. She assures him that dinner is already prepared and mentions that they can eat as soon as his older brother, Sejun, returns home. Complaining of a sore throat from sleeping too long, Seyoung heads over to the refrigerator to grab a cold bottle of water. As he quietly gulps down the refreshing drink, Yeonhee watches him with a pounding heart, realizing that she needs to steel her resolve and address the elephant in the room right now. Taking a deep breath to calm her nerves, she slowly turns to him, preparing to tell him clearly that what they are doing is completely wrong. However, before she can even finish bringing up what happened earlier, Seyoung catches her completely off guard. He suddenly steps up close behind her and starts to help her slice onions. Letting out a startled gasp, a flustered Yeonhee frantically protests the sudden move, demanding to know what he thinks he is doing. But Seyoung simply dismisses her worries, whispering that it is perfectly fine since they are completely alone in the house, leaving his sister-in-law trembling in confusion over his sussy words as she struggles to keep her composure. Back in the kitchen, Yeonhee tries to push Seyoung away, warning him to stop slicing the onions immediately because her husband, Sejun, will be home at any moment. She insists that their morning exercise was nothing more than a simple mistake, but her words only cause Seyoung to pause. Looking down at her, he asks if she truly believes their cardiovascular training was just a mistake, leaving his flustered sister-in-law completely speechless as his hand remains firmly resting on the knife. Before they can argue any further, the sharp ring of the door chime echoes through the house, sending both of them into a sudden panic. Sejun cheerfully calls out that he is home, pausing at the entryway to note his brother's shoes on the floor and realizing Seyoung must have finished work early today. Walking further into the house, he warmly calls out to Seyoung to let him know he has returned, prompting Seyoung to quickly reply from the kitchen counter. Sejun walks into the kitchen and is pleasantly surprised to find Seyoung helping Yeonhee with the food, playfully asking what the special occasion is. Seyoung casually answers that he merely wanted to help his sister-in-law out for once, leaving a silent, blushing Yeonhee to stand beside them in utter embarrassment. Entirely oblivious to the tension, Sejun smiles warmly and remarks on how nice it is to see the two of them getting along so well, announcing that he will wash up quickly before they all sit down for dinner. Seyoung politely bids him go ahead, and the moment his brother leaves the room, a heavy, silent sigh of relief escapes from Yeonhee's lips. Once they are alone again, Seyoung turns to her and asks her to continue what she was trying to say earlier. Before she can gather her thoughts, this incredibly sussy idiot leans in and directly asks if she will come to his room later tonight. Stunned by his forwardness, Yeonhee silently wonders if he has always been this stupid. However, she quickly realizes that this might actually be the perfect opportunity to set things straight. Smiling subtly to herself, she agrees to meet him in his room tonight, firmly resolving that she will use the opportunity to tell him fair and square that they can have a calorie-burning session again. As the moon rises high over the neighborhood, Yeonhee heads outside to complete her usual late-night jump rope routine, pushing through the exhausting cardio and sweating heavily in the cool night air. Afterward, she steps into the warm shower, letting the water wash away her fatigue while she mentally steels her resolve. She reminds herself that Seyoung is simply confused and that she was equally mistaken, concluding that she must firmly set her boundaries tonight, once and for all. Wrapping herself in a clean white towel, she quietly slips back into her bedroom, only to find Sejun already fast asleep and snoring softly on the bed. Seizing the quiet moment, she changes into a delicate jacket, and steps out into the dimly lit hallway. Standing right outside Si-young's bedroom door, our usually composed sister-in-law feels her heart hammer violently against her chest, leaving her to wonder why on earth she is so incredibly tensed up when her only goal is to tell him to stop. Standing outside Si-young's bedroom, Yun-hee raises her hand and gives the wooden door a polite knock, softly announcing her arrival before our waiting manager warmly invites her inside. She gingerly steps into the dimly lit room, her bare feet pressing against the floor as she sheepishly apologizes for keeping him waiting. Si-young quickly reassures her that it is perfectly fine, gesturing to the empty spot on the mattress beside him and gently encouraging her to sit down so her legs won't get tired from standing. Accepting his invitation, Yun-hee sits on the edge of the bed, with her heart pounding wildly in her chest, firmly reminding herself that she needs to speak with absolute clarity so this stubborn idiot doesn't misinterpret her intentions. Looking him directly in the eyes, she quietly explains that the cardiovascular training that happened between them earlier was a major mistake, admitting that she simply got swept away by the chaos of the moment before she could think straight. She goes on to declare her devotion to his older brother, Si-jun, gently suggesting that Si-young's young heart must have momentarily led him astray, causing him to make a careless mistake without fully realizing the consequences. Listening to her speech in silence, Si-young lets out a soft, defeated sigh before quietly nodding in agreement, admitting that he understands her position if she feels that strongly about it. However, his surprisingly easy acceptance leaves Yun-hee feeling a sudden, unexpected wave of guilt as she looks down at her hands, wondering why she feels so bad when she is technically the one trying to do the right thing. She quickly shakes the silly thought from her head, firmly telling herself that she has absolutely nothing to feel guilty about since she is the real victim trying to establish boundaries. But just as she thinks the matter is completely settled, Si-young suddenly turns the tables on his sister-in-law once again. Reaching out with a steady hand, he firmly grasps her hand, locking his eyes onto hers as their hearts beat rapidly in the quiet room. Looking at her with absolute intensity, this relentless idiot boldly proposes that if they are truly going to end things here, they should share one final, fat-burning cardio session together before parting ways forever. Staring at him with wide, shocked eyes, Yun-hee stands completely frozen, utterly bewildered by his sudden proposal. She nervously asks if he somehow completely misunderstood her entire explanation, firmly reiterating that she has no intention of continuing their cardio partnership any longer. However, Si-young remains completely unfazed, leaning in slightly as he calmly proposes a compromise. He softly requests that they share just one final fat-burning cardio together, promising that he will never touch her again if she agrees to this one last request. Looking at her face, this stubborn idiot swallows hard, silently waiting to see if his words have reached her. With her heart pounding furiously against her chest, Yun-hee gazes back at him, completely baffled as to why he is being so incredibly stubborn about the matter. She cannot help but wonder if his feelings for her are truly that deep, silently questioning whether he really desires to be sussy to her so badly that he is willing to beg for one last chance. Overwhelmed by his persistence, our usually composed sister-in-law finally lets out a soft sigh and reluctantly agrees to his proposal. She turns to him with a flushed face and firmly warns him that this must absolutely be the very last time, expressing her sincere hope that he will keep his word and leave her alone afterward. Si-young looks back at her with soft, deeply grateful eyes, quietly promising that he will. Feeling her face turn completely red as her heart hammers in her chest, Yun-hee quietly urges him to hurry up so they can get started and finally put an end to this fat-burning cardio encounter once and for all. Later, Si-young glances at his digital alarm clock, realizing it is already past midnight, and gently suggests that his sister-in-law, Lee Ryong, head back to her room to get some rest. Agreeing with a quiet nod, she prepares to slip away, quietly pointing out how much trouble they would be in if her husband, Si-jun, were to wake up and find her missing. Si-young can only watch in disappointment as she prepares to leave, silently wishing she could stay and do high-intensity cardio sessions with him in his room instead of returning to his brother's room. Just as she is about to walk out, Lee Ryong leans in. She looks at him with a soft, comforting gaze, acknowledging that she knows how difficult it is for him to let her go, but teasingly tells him not to look so downcast because his worried expression is making her anxious. Highly flustered by her proximity, this idiot can only stammer a quiet agreement, watching in silence as she bids him good night and quietly closes the bedroom door behind her. Si-young is left alone in his bed, a soft, content smile spreading across his face as he drifts off. The scene transitions to the bright daytime at Si-young's bookstore, where Si-young smoothly handles a transaction, thanking a customer and handing back his payment card with a warm farewell. As the satisfied customer departs, Si-young turns his attention to his blonde part-timer, Yeon-hee, playfully noting that while she was completely panicked during her first day on the job, she seems to be handling the workload perfectly fine today. The proud employee smugly brushes it off, declaring that her natural skills are simply showing and that part-time work is a total piece of cake for someone as experienced as her. Leaning over the counter, the observant part-timer suddenly notices Si-young's unusual expression and curiously asks if something good has happened, teasingly pointing out that he usually sports a highly sour face. Caught completely off guard, our blushing manager stammers a confused reply, prompting her to giggle and playfully guess that he must have found himself a girlfriend. While she initially mocks the idea by suggesting he is far too pure to do such things, Si-young's sudden, blushing silence makes her eyes widen in realization. Sensing she hit the nail on the head, the excited employee leans in, desperately demanding to know if the girl is pretty and what her character is like, leaving a flustered Si-young trying to deny her suspicions while she remains completely convinced that her boss is hiding a secret connection. Before the interrogation can go any further, the entrance bell chimes, and Si-young's sister-in-law, Lee Ryong, steps through the door carrying a tiered lunchbox. She cheerfully announces that she has brought Si-young some lunch, prompting a pleasantly surprised Si-young to greet her warmly. Bowing politely, the part-timer welcomes her as the boss's sister-in-law, but her sharp mind immediately picks up on their familiar greetings, curiously wondering why the two of them are close enough to casually call each other by their first names. Lee Ryong smiles warmly and notes that it is wonderful to have Yeon-hee working today as well, happily revealing that she prepared plenty of food so they can both enjoy a delicious lunch together, leaving the grateful part-timer thanking her while Si-young smiles in quiet relief. Reaching across the counter, Si-young offers to take the heavy lunchbox from his sister-in-law Lee Ryong. However, as he grabs the handle, his fingers accidentally brush against her hand, sending a sudden jolt through him that makes him gasp in surprise. He quickly pulls the container closer, his cheeks flushing a deep red and his heart pounding rapidly as this flustered manager quietly thanks her for going out of her way to bring them food. Lee Ryong's face also turns a warm shade of pink, her own heart fluttering as she shyly tells him not to mention it and expresses her hope that he enjoys his meal. Standing right next to them, the blonde part-timer watches this entire exchange with wide, disbelieving eyes, utterly baffled by why the two of them are suddenly blushing and acting so flustered around each other. As she looks back and forth between her boss's embarrassed face and his sister-in-law's sheepish smile, a wild and highly scandalous realization finally dawns on her, leaving her silently panicking over the shocking possibility that her boss might actually be doing endurance training with his very own sister-in-law. Go Yeon-hee, the bookstore's blonde employee, slowly slides a book out from the shelf, her mind drifting far away from her actual work duties. Dressed in a form-fitting green dress, she stands by the racks, completely lost in her thoughts as she recalls how her boss Si-young was looking at his sister-in-law earlier in the day. She initially wonders if there is something sussy going on between them, but she quickly dismisses the ridiculous thought with a quiet sigh, realizing there is absolutely no way her boss would be seeing his own brother's wife. Still, this curious employee cannot help but wonder who the mystery woman in Si-young's life actually is, deeply curious about who he could possibly be going out with. Her deep contemplation is suddenly interrupted when Si-young calls out her name to get her attention. Turning around in mild surprise, she looks over at her boss as he explains that, since the back warehouse stock hasn't been sorted through yet, they should head back and clear it out together. She quickly snaps out of her daze and eagerly runs over to assist him, promising she will be right there to help. Stepping into the storage room, Si-young flips on the light switch to reveal massive, towering stacks of books piled high on the concrete floor. Looking at the overwhelming mess, Si-young lets out a sheepish laugh, realizing that this task is going to take them a lot longer than he originally anticipated. Yeon-hee takes a look at the heavy boxes and immediately notes that sorting through just the main piles will take at least 30 minutes, adding that the massive stack in the corner will easily take over 2 hours of backbreaking labor. She playfully pouts and teases Si-young, calling him an absolute devil of an employer for making his worker do such heavy lifting. Feeling a bit guilty, the young idiot scratches his head and suggests that since he can handle the rest on his own, she should just head home and call it a day. However, our clever employee isn't about to let him off that easily, teasingly suggesting that she knows his tricks and that he will only find a way to punish her with more work later if she leaves now. With a bright smile, she offers a compromise, lifting a heavy cardboard box and declaring that she is willing to do all the heavy lifting for him if he agrees to buy her a drink later tonight. Si-young can only look at his brazen employee in mild amusement, quietly reflecting that rather than him being a devil boss, she is definitely the real devil employee of the shop, though he agrees that buying her a single drink is a small price to pay for getting all this work done. With the deal officially made, Yeon-hee happily gets to work as Seyoung begins directing her, pointing out that the novels should go on one shelf while the essays are placed in the rack. As she crouches down right in front of him to sort the textbooks onto the lower shelves, our clueless monkey suddenly finds himself in an incredibly awkward situation. Bending over directly in his line of sight, her sussy posture leaves Seyoung completely flustered, swallowing hard in sheer embarrassment as he desperately tries to figure out where on earth he should avert his eyes. Thankfully, his torment is cut short when she suddenly gasps in surprise, pulling a specific book from the pile. Looking down at the cover of the novel, titled The Big Bad Book, Seyoung asks if she is familiar with the story. She eagerly confirms that she is, noting that it is one of the most popular and highly rated novels on the shelves because of its incredibly detailed and descriptive cardiovascular training education, sending both of their imaginations drifting off to the dramatic and passionate pages of the popular story. Seyoung points out that the sussy novel actually doesn't hesitate to include several highly controversial and proper scenes, admitting that it is rather unexpected to see his employee reading these types of books. Standing remarkably close to him, the blonde employee, Go Yeon-hee, holds the volume open and explains that her school's theater club is actually preparing to perform this very story for their upcoming play. Seyoung takes a glance at the passionate lines printed on the open page while Yeon-hee proudly clears her throat, boasting that she was actually selected to play the main lead character. Seyoung is taken aback by this revelation, realizing that the main lead of the story is indeed the controversial dummy herself. Standing right beside her boss in the tight space, this silly employee suddenly becomes hyper-aware of their proximity, her heart fluttering as she realizes just how sussily Seyoung is standing next to her. Looking down sheepishly, Yeon-hee sighs and admits that she has spent a lot of time thinking about the role, but she is seriously considering giving it up altogether. She explains that even though this is the very first lead role she has ever managed to land after working so hard, she keeps getting her mistakes pointed out during rehearsals. Because of this constant criticism, she is feeling deeply discouraged and was thinking about simply handing the coveted role over to one of her theater juniors instead. Seyoung looks at her with genuine concern, pointing out that she will surely regret giving up such a major opportunity after working so hard for it. Yeon-hee sadly agrees that she definitely would regret it, but she feels she has very little choice in the matter since her acting skills simply aren't up to par yet. Determined to distract herself from her heavy thoughts, she urges him to get this warehouse work finished quickly so they can both head home soon. Lifting a heavy cardboard box with a loud grunt, Yeon-hee struggles to carry the load, leaving Seyoung to silently reflect on how much she clearly wanted to play that lead role despite her current doubts. As she sighs heavily and carries the box through the cluttered warehouse, her high-heeled sandal catches on a thick red book left carelessly on the floor. Losing her footing entirely, the clumsy girl gasps in sheer shock as she begins to tumble backward, sending the box of books flying through the air to scatter across the floor in a loud, chaotic mess. Fortunately for our accident-prone worker, Seyoung reacts with lightning reflexes, lunging forward to catch her before she hits the hard concrete floor. The two of them crash down in a heap, with Yeon-hee landing directly on top of her boss and pinning him beneath her. As they lie there among the scattered novels, their hearts begin to pound wildly in the sudden silence. Catching her breath, a flustered Yeon-hee mutters about how terrifying that sudden fall was, prompting her exasperated boss to wonder aloud why on earth she has to be so incredibly clumsy all the time. Locking eyes, both of them blush furiously as their hearts hammer loudly against each other. Yeon-hee suddenly notices the rapid beating of Seyoung's chest, while Seyoung tries to ease the intense tension by gently requesting that she please get her long hair out of his face if she is truly sorry about the fall. Apologizing profusely, Yeon-hee sheepishly explains that she really didn't intend to be this bothersome or clumsy. Seyoung only smiles warmly, reassuring her that it is perfectly fine and playfully addressing her as Miss Dummy. Yeon-hee bursts into a bright fit of giggles, finding her boss's humor incredibly funny and asking what is up with the sudden nickname. Seyoung playfully retorts that she always seems to sport a bored look on her face, which makes the title fit her perfectly. Suddenly, this dramatic employee has a realization, recognizing that his words are the exact lines spoken by the character James in the novel they were just discussing. Deciding to show off her acting skills right then and there, the dramatic blonde takes a deep breath and fully commits to her character. Sitting proudly on top of the floor, she strikes a passionate pose and dramatically recites the dummy's lines, proclaiming that while she might have been born an orphan and raised by the charity of others, that doesn't mean she is destined to spend her entire life living like a loser. She leans in with absolute confidence, delivering her performance with intense emotion as she declares that wasting away a pretty face like hers in a life of sheer boredom is practically a sin. Lying flat on the floor, Seyoung is completely stunned by her sudden dramatic shift, silently realizing that his clumsy employee is actually an exceptionally talented actress. Yeonhee delivers the final line of the scene, locking her gaze onto his and calling him by the character's name, James. Seung's mind completely short-circuits. As he looks at her face up close, the sudden proximity makes him realize for the first time that his employee is actually incredibly beautiful. Completely captivated by her intense gaze, our blushing manager's heart hammers wildly in his chest as he softly complies with her performance,